Okay, this is John Black, Super Chemist. I left up some of this picture from last video on germination, so you can see the times that, 45 minutes for a pressure cooker, 90 minutes for just steam sterilization, where you just use a regular pot. Now, sterilizing empty jars or, a knife or something or whatever, petri dishes, that's no big deal. 45 minutes in a pressure cooker, 90 minutes in a regular pot, that's great. Even with agar, because agar is just basically water, it's sugar water. And the heat goes through it quick. But when you have a jar like this with grain, think about the grain that's way in the middle of the jar. It's insulated by a couple inches of grain. So, you know what I mean? It has a big coat on, being insulated from the heat and the pressure. So it's going to take longer than doing agar, okay? Now, in general, you first, when you got your plates, right, and you finally have a plate that's nice and contamination free, you can see it's all myCELLYum, no spores in there. You're ready to move on to the next step, which would be spawning. And basically all it is you're moving it from your petri dish into jars or bags. Now, how much can one plate germinate, or how much can one plate spawn on grain? Well, if this is a standard size plate, you cut out little squares about that size. You can see my finger, like about the size of your fingernail. And that one fingernail piece could, spawn in a 1 quart jar. That's what I think a lot of people do. Me, I put 2 or 3 pieces in. Okay? And the smaller I am, the less stuff I'm making, the more I'll put in. Like, I bought 10 plates. 3 of them I'll probably use to germinate and isolate, maybe isolate my stuff. And then the rest of the plates, I'll just use to grow myCELLYum on. And even though I only want to do, a couple jars or whatever, if I got 5 jars and I got 5 petri dishes full, I'll put the whole petri dish in. But you cut them up into little squares. Okay? That will make the spawning time, if you throw in a whole, cut this up into 15 squares and threw it into a quart jar with grain in it, it's going to fill out that jar with myCELLYum in no time. So you have to hydrate your grain, though, okay? Before you move your myCELLYum into the jars and spawn it, you need to hydrate the grains, because myCELLYum loves water, okay? Now, I want you to remember from last video, whether it's a regular pot like this or a pressure cooker, you need a tribette at the bottom, or whatever that's called, where it's a little grid, so you can put your stuff on. It's like a little tray so it stands up above, because you don't want your flame touching the bottom of the pot, and then your jars are directly on the bottom of the pot. You're going to start cooking your grains. So you put that tribette on there, and you can just use these rings. See these rings on a mason jar? Take the ring off and put a whole bunch of them on the bottom of the pot. If you don't have whatever that's called, a tribette or whatever. Remember to always have water in here. Don't have it so much that it's going to boil and knock over all your stuff. When you put stuff in, if you just have one jar, put in a bunch of empty jars, so that your one jar doesn't fall over, be jostled around with the boiling. But remember to have enough water in here, whether it's a pressure cooker or just a regular pot. Have enough water in there to last, so that because your steam is going to come out, you'll have less and less water in here. Now, if you're just doing a steam sterilization, it's no big deal. You can open the lid up, pour some more water in there. But a pressure cooker, you don't want to be opening and closing it all, you know what I mean? So make sure you have enough water in there. After you put your grain in the jar, you want to take your cap. See how it has the metal side up like that? It has this gaskets. I'm going to turn that upside down so it's gasket out. Put your thing on, don't tighten it all the way and then take it back, like, you know, so it's almost off of the thing. And in that way, you're not putting in a closed jar. You know, when the pressure builds up in here, it can get out. When you're growing your mycelium in here, it'll have air exchange because there'll be a little crack, you know, because you turn this upside down and you loosen the jar a little bit, the lid. Some people just drill a hole in this and put some micro pour tape on it, and that way it can breathe, and you can do that too. I don't do that though, but it is a better idea than just leaving the jars open. You know what I mean? Unless you put some micro pour tape around, you know, right here, all the way around the jar. Micro pour tape will filter out any contamination, but it'll allow air exchange so that the fungus can breathe, because they breathe just like us. They breathe oxygen and then they spit out carbon dioxide. Now remember when I said you were doing jars, you know, they're mason jars to do agar. I said to keep the cap regular, keep the gasket on the bottom like it's supposed to be. That's because when it's for agar and it's plates, I like it that way so I can tighten it up. There's nothing in there, you know what I mean, it needs air. So I want to be able to tighten it at that point and let it sit for 3 days, see if anything grows on it. But again, even when you do that, you just basically, you basically put the lid on there, just setting on there. You don't even screw it on. You use aluminum foil to hold everything together. And then when you take it out of the pot, you tighten it up really quick before you do anything or transfer it to your other box that you're going to store it in. Okay, like I said, I'm not going over the best way. I'm not going over, you know, getting into depth. I'm just telling you how I do it and how it can be done. Okay, you want whole grains. Okay, brown rice, popcorn, oats, milo or millet, which is bird feed, bird seeds, bird feed, whatever. But all of them, no matter what grain, you can use a bunch of other grains too. They all should be whole grains, okay? Then you need to hydrate them and sterilize them. We're going to go over the easiest ones to the hardest ones. Okay, first there's 90-second rice, Uncle Ben's. It's already hydrated and it's already sterile. So once you buy it, you're done, okay? Now let's move on to brown rice. Brown rice that is not instant rice. Okay, we're just going to follow the blue writing down. Rice volume is X. Water volume is 2X. That means if you use a quart of rice, you use 2 quarts of water. If you use a liter of rice, you use 2 liters of water. Just double the volume of water. Boil the water. Add the rice into the boiled water. Turn the heat down and simmer for 10 minutes. Simmer means almost a boil or at a low boil. Okay. After 10 minutes, strain and wash with cold water. Then let the rice drain for 30 minutes. And, go around every once in a while and stir it up, so shake it so the water gets off of it. You want the water inside that hydrated your grain. You don't want the water that's outside. That's excess water. Then after that, do a test. Take some grain and put it on like a paper towel or something and see if there's a whole bunch of water that's sticking to the paper towel, or when, just put some on there and then wait 10 seconds or 20 seconds and throw it off. If there's just a couple drops, it's no big deal, but if it's all wet, then your stuff is too wet. So when it's dry enough, fill your jars 3/4 full. That way you have room so you can, when you want to break it up, in the jar, you have space in there to do that. Like I said, put the lid on upside down, or put a hole in it and use micro pour tape to cover the hole as a filter. Put aluminum foil cap, over top of the bottle, and put one underneath the bottle so it covers up the whole bottle. Put the bottom one on first, then put the second one on, the top on second, and have the top one overlap the bottom one. I mentioned to use a trivet. Then if you're just going to steam distill, no pressure, you're just going to steam heat it, do it for 90 minutes. Or if you have a pressure cooker, do it for 45 minutes. Now, if you have a canner that goes up to like 15 psi above atmospheric pressure, maybe do it 30 minutes. Let it cool down, okay? Make sure that it cools down, at least down to where you can handle it with your hands. That way, because as it cools down, stuff is going to condense. So there'll be less gases and there'll be a vacuum in here. And it'll suck in, if you have a loose can, it's going to suck in air, from the contaminated outside. But if you wait for it to cool down, you don't have to worry about that. And when you open your pot, tighten all your lids. Tighten all your lids until you get them into a still box. And then you can do, you have it tightened up, just untighten it a quarter turn, make sure it's still on there, but it's loose, and you're good to go. You can put micropore tape around here or drill hole it. Okay, let's go to how to do popcorn, okay? Popcorn, stuff you buy and you put in a little bit of oil in a pan and you throw in your popcorn and it pops and makes popcorn. By that, follow these blue instructions exactly to the T, except its corn volume is X and the water volume is twice the corn. Instead of adding the rice, you add corn. Instead of simmering for 10 minutes, you do it for an hour. Instead of letting it drain for 30 minutes, you let it drain for an hour. Now remember, you shake it and stir it up once in a while to get the water off of it. And everything else is the same again until down here. You steam heat it for 2 hours instead of an hour and a half or 90 minutes. Okay? And if you pressure cook it, instead of 45 minutes, you do it for 90. Everything else is the same. Okay? Exactly. And you've noticed so far we have not used a pressure cooker at all. I showed you how to do the agar and termination with no pressure cooker. Now you know how to do 90-second rice, you know how to do brown rice, and you know how to do corn with no pressure cooker. Now the reason why those are easy to do, okay, the rice and the corn, is because those are for people. You don't get no feed for, like corn that's for feed for animals. This only works for popcorn, for humans. Because the stuff is already just like the 90-second rice. It's already sterile almost. It's already clean. If it wasn't clean, we wouldn't be eating it. You know what I'm saying? But oats, bird feed, okay, bird feed would be milo or millet. Those are all, and then pretty much every other grain you can think of is done the same way. But don't quote me on that because I don't know. But they're all same directions here. Everything's the same, except instead of adding rice, you add oats or your bird feed or whatever grain you have, milo, millet, whatever. Instead of simmering for 10 minutes, you simmer for 30. And when you dry it, you have to dry these better. You have to spread them out and lay them down. They don't dry as easy as the corn and the rice. So you got to lay them on trays, the thin layer of the grain, and wait until, it's dry enough. Like I said, you just put it on some paper towels, let it sit 10-20 seconds, throw the seeds off or whatever, your grain off, and look at the paper towel. Is it wet or is it pretty much dry? If it's almost dry or dry, then you're done. If it's wet, then there's two ways. You got to let them dry some more. You can't steam heat them. You can steam heat them, if you want to do it for like 20 hours or something. I really don't know how long you'd have to do it. But pressure cooking, you can do it in 90 minutes. Whether it's oats, bird feed, milo, millet, whatever. It's going to be 90 minutes to pressure cook them. Okay? But everything else is the same. Okay? And like I said, the 90-second rice, Uncle Ben's 90-second rice, get whole grains. And that stuff's already hydrated. It's slightly too wet, really. But it's good enough. and it's already sterile.